As a city for romance, you know, Venice has few peers. It has played host to lovers from around the world, and centuries ago spawned the man whose amorous efforts are legendary.
Faites une folie. Emmenez-moi. Nous irons chez moi en Champagne.
History's most publicized lover was born Giacomo Casanova.
Giacomo.
Legend and lore have made Casanova out to be the embodiment of the Latin lover, the perfect ladies' man. There is some truth in that. He was flamboyant, amorous, and quite vain.
But he certainly is full of himself.
Yes.
And there are those who claim that the spirit of Casanova still haunts Venice. It is his spirit, they say, that warms the sea air, which brings out romance in the human soul. But as is often true, the legend is more popular than the truth. In truth, the real Casanova loved men as well as women, and the women that he loved were often for hire. A con man, he invented his own pedigree to seduce the rich.
He must be chastised.
Well, after 3 bouts of VD, Casanova was subsequently banned from Venice as a public nuisance. He is absent still, buried in Bohemia. Count Alvise Zorzi is a Venetian who knows the fact and fiction of Casanova's past. How would you characterize what Casanova did for a living? He was more than a gigolo.
Well, he was what was called in the time an adventurer. He did a lot of things, but particularly what is the explanation of his great fortune over the centuries is that he was a great writer. And the basic point of Casanova's personality was the extraordinary capacity of communicate in all the manners, personally and in writing.
Is that how he managed to endear himself to so much royalty throughout all of Europe?
Well, he had a life as many others had in that pleasant, amusing and funny century as was the 18th century. But he has sublimated everything with his talent. He did a lot of strange things, indulging to, for instance, to finance. He invented a kind of system to earn money, to let governments to
the first
earn
lottery,
money.
right?
Yes. And then he was dealing also with spirits, with black magic, and he used black magic just to obtain money. And that he was an extraordinary card player. And he often won, often he didn't win, but he was particularly involved in all this kind of thing. He was a gambler by instinct.
But what about his sexual adventures? I mean, aside from his memoirs where he built himself up to be a wonderful lover, is there anything else that would lead one to believe he was exceptional in that regard?
Well, he was a man of enormous appetite in all the fields. He had an enormous gastronomic appetite. The descriptions of his meals are sometimes astonishing. And he had also an enormous sexual appetite.
Yeah.
But back again to that point, all his loving adventures were probably not so extraordinary as we think, but he described them so well. It is always the point of the great writer.
The Venetian fathers have now requested his remains. What's been the response of the Czechoslovakian government?
Well, there are no remains of Casanova. We don't have any of his bones. He is buried in near the chapel of the castle of Dux in Bohemia, where he spent his last years as a librarian to Count Wallstein-Wartenberg. But as for many great personalities of the past, including, if I'm not wrong, Mozart, his grave was lost.
As I say goodbye, maybe it's worth noting that, like the myth of Casanova, the image of the Latin lover seems in jeopardy. According to a highly scientific poll of 20,000 Italians that was released less than 2 months ago here, a number of Italian women find their husbands lacking in bed. According to the poll, 66% of married women here admitted to adultery, and half of those cited the fact that they weren't sexually satisfied by their husbands. We're going to come back in just a moment. There's more ahead from Italy right after this.